Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 30 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Haft. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best substitute co-host in the game. You've seen him all over the Painted Lines. He is the godfather of the Painted Lines. It's Dives. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Dives, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited to join. I'm honored to join. I'm just one of those degenerate Spider-Man fans that's waiting just one more week, a week from tomorrow, and then we got No Way Home coming out. So I'm just obsessed about Spider-Man right now.
All right. If you follow our show live or if you watch the archives on YouTube, you'll recognize Dibes is the guy that's always dropping lame dad jokes in the chat. But I've got a lot of respect for lame dad jokes. I've got them myself. I had to explain them to Mark last week, so he just doesn't get it. But so Mark's unable to join us today. So Dibes is going to join me for our traditional Eagles game review. And then he's going to drop off later, and I will solo it to the best of my ability around the NFL. So we do have a great show lined up for you guys. We're going to review every Week 13 game, starting, of course, with the Eagles and the Jets. But before we get to that, this podcast is live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. So drop us a comment. We love to interact with you guys live on the air. If you're listening later, we appreciate you too. Please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. The podcast goes out there later. So Dibes, let's get into it. The Eagles travel to the Meadowlands for the second straight week. They get over the hump. They avenge sort of their loss they took there the week before to the Giants with a 33-18 victory over the Jets. Where do you want to start talking about this game?
Pretty obvious. You got to start off with Gardner Minshew, right? Like, this guy was really, really good. 20 of 25 passes, 242 yards, 2 touchdowns, 133.7 passer rating. He completed 80% of his passes. That completion percentage was the highest mark of any quarterback this year. And you look at like why that's important. Jalen Hurts has failed to complete his passes, at least 60% of his passes at any mark this season, or in 6 starts this season. So that level of efficiency by Minshew, what you saw, is definitely worth noting, especially with Minshew's ability to, locate those checkdowns, which is he did a lot of, especially with Kenny Gainwell. And that's a little bit of an area that Jalen Hurts has absolutely struggled a little bit this year. You look at his first half, man, perfect quarterback rating. For fourth Eagles quarterback since 1991 to achieve that feat. Nick Foles, Michael Vick, and then McNabb, and then who am I missing? Someone else. But for me, it wasn't perfect though. Like, you kind of saw why he's a backup quarterback. Like, he was underthrowing guys. His throws were a little slow. They weren't getting there in time. You look at, on top of that, like, you got to look at it both ways. Like, the Jets had the second lowest blitz rate that the Eagles faced this year at 17.9%. So as well as good as Minshew looked, there are definitely some areas where it definitely showed you that he's not exactly, this next Tom Brady, like that guy was saying during the comment section during the post-game show. But what I'm interested most is that return of the Eagles screen game. I want to hear your thoughts on that, because we saw the Eagles use play action in the screen game a lot last week. Just over 60% of Minshew's passing yards came after the catch, which I love to see, especially with Goddard there. I think he had three forced missed tackles there after the catch. I want to see that return of Dallas Goddard. I want to see more of that screen game become more of a weapon in this Eagles offense. That has been kind of a talking point over the last several weeks. Like, where do we get more and more offense, especially when it's struggling? What are your thoughts on this passing and screen game for the Eagles?
It really surprised me going back. I pulled up the next gen stats after the game to tweet out the passing chart like I normally do. And it surprised me to see Gardner Minshew with a 3.16 second time to throw. It felt like watching the game, he was a lot more decisive. He got the ball out quicker, but that time to throw was pretty well on pace with what Jalen Hurts typically does. A lot of people have compared this game to the Week 1 game against the Falcons. Yeah. Gardner Minshew had an ADOT average depth of target of 6 yards in that first game. Jalen Hurts had an average depth of target of 4 yards. In this game, Gardner Minshew completes 80% of his passes with a plus 14% completion over expectation. In week 1, it was a 77% for Hurts with a plus 9% completion over expectation. So I think you saw similar game plans. Early in the year, the Eagles weren't running the ball the way they have been lately with Jalen Hurts, but they leaned on that screen game. And I think you saw that in this game. It was sort of a return to week 1. Now, I think watching this game, it's clear that Gardner Minshew is more decisive in the pocket. He feels more comfortable in the pocket as a passer. But he just doesn't have the arm talent that Jalen Hurts does. And Jalen Hurts isn't like top echelon of arm talent, but I think you could really see it on that. I think it was the first touchdown pass to Dallas Goddard. Goddard beats that guy man coverage up the seam pretty straight away, and Minshew reads it, and he makes that throw, but that ball just kind of hangs in the air, and it ends up dropping in there. I tweeted during the game, I tweeted that clip, and I said, that's just a beautiful throw. He dropped it right in front of the safety, but watching it later, like that throw was open and that ball hung in the air, and Goddard absorbs a hit from the safety. He's catching it. He should have never had to because the ball just hangs. And so, that's a limitation for Minshew. We saw the run game can work without Hurts. It was a lot different. It was under center. You can't run that QB zone read. I thought it was a huge credit to Nick Sirianni that he's able to come into this game completely taking away that shotgun zone read sort of offense that they've relied on so much the last 4 weeks, and that he was able to do something different. He was still able to get the running game working, but he was able to build an offense around an entirely different quarterback.
Yeah, totally. Like, and you look at kind of the Eagles and running backs and tight end. The Eagles running backs and tight ends combined for 11 catches in the first half. Only 3 from the wide receivers. I'm a little kind of discouraged by Devontae Smith's lack of production over these last couple of weeks. But you look at kind of Jalen Hurts and, his struggle there in that intermediate area of the field. You look at how the Eagles were able to capitalize on play action this week. Hopefully that is a sign of things to come. Hopefully we see kind of more of that when Jalen Hurts goes under center. We saw, obviously you're not going to see the same offense with Gardner Minshew, but you saw a lot more under center last week with Minshew compared to Hurts. Minshew kind of struggled with the RPOs. You could see that it definitely was not his bread and butter there for sure. But I agree with you completely. Like Minshew, he made quick decisions. He went through his progressions. As we watched Jalen Hurts all season long. Like that's something that has not been that great this year. He's definitely not taking the next step in those areas. So Minshew played very well, albeit it is the Jets. The Jets defense was awful. It was god awful, and they didn't blitz. So we'll see what that means, big picture wise moving forward. But next, I want to talk to you about the offensive line, because I think the real big story happening right now is this Eagles offensive line. You look at, Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce allowing 0 pressures against the Jets. The Eagles ran for 185 yards against them. The last time the Eagles were under 175 yards on the ground was October 24th. And on top of that, you saw 0 bonehead plays from Nate Herbert, which was another plus. So the Eagles offensive line, I think, is the big story here heading into the playoffs. I think there's I think I saw something like a 38% chance the Eagles make the playoffs, somewhere around there. So if the Eagles do make the playoffs, it is going to be behind this Eagles offensive line, because you never know what you're going to get with Jonathan Gannon's defense. I'm not sold on the Eagles defensive line. We'll talk about it in a bit. But for me, what do you think? I think the offense is the identity of this Eagles team. What about you, man?
Yeah, the Eagles are a team that values building through the trenches. And we said in the offseason that there was a high floor for this team just because of how good they were on the offensive and defensive line. We said, if healthy, the Eagles probably have the top offensive line or a top 2 offensive line and probably a top 5 defensive line in the NFL. Now, only one side of the ball has lived up to that hype, but the Eagles offensive line has been phenomenal this year. And it was an underrated concern for me going into this game that you looked at the Eagles offensive guards and you've got Samalo, Brooks, and Driscoll are all out. That's 3 of your top 4 offensive guards, and Jason Kelce was banged up. And so presumably Landon Dickerson's the center. So your only healthy guard out of your top 4 is also your backup center for a guy that's banged up. But did you notice any of that on Sunday? And there wasn't. Kelsey goes out for like a snap, and we get the bad snap. But which Jason Kelsey, by the way, most important player on this offense. I've said it for a long time. Phenomenal player, but it really can't be understated the job that Jeff Stoutland has done with guys like Jordan Mailata, who totally new to the game of football a few years ago. Now he's your franchise left tackle. And I mean, he looks to be an elite level left tackle. He's like the second highest graded pass blocker by PFF over the last month. You've got Landon Dickerson, who, if he can stay healthy, which was really the only concern there ever was with him, if he can stay healthy, he's looking elite at the left guard position, and he and Mailata play really well next to each other. Lane Johnson, he doesn't get the hype that he used to get, but he's playing at a solid level as well. It's just so much fun to watch this offensive line. I've said before, an offensive line is kind of one of my bread and butter things I like to watch. And most people don't, and I get that. But I've said before, if you can't enjoy watching this Eagles offensive line, you'll never find one that you think is fun, because some of the things they do, pulling a left guard and a left tackle across the formation while the right tackle goes to the second left. Like, they do such intricate things and creative things in the run game, and people watch it and, it's just pounding the rock, but it's not just pounding the rock. Like, this run design is excellent. I don't know if that's Stoutland. He's been the run game coordinator in the past. I don't know if that's Sirianni drawing that up, but it's really impressive, the different things that they're able to pull out.
Yeah, that is everything. If the Eagles are gonna, get a playoff game, and if they're going to even come close to getting a playoff win, it'll be behind that Eagles offensive line. And then go to the opposite side, the defense, man. The defense, it was like a tale of two halves for sure. What you had, I just thought they were highly erratic. The Giants scored touchdowns on their first 3 possessions on Sunday. Zach Wilson scored 3 touchdowns three touchdowns total in one of his previous 7 starts. And then he just went right down the field against this Eagles defense. It was just the complete opposite in this second half. But I see kind of the same weaknesses of this Eagles defense in weeks past and years past. Like when opposing offenses like stretch our linebackers, hit us on the edge, the Eagles have never had an answer for that. Their linebackers, especially Alex Singleton, can't stop anybody. So I still see that being a major Achilles heel if the Eagles go up against a formidable opponent. I don't know how they're going to stop that. What about you?
Yeah, it seemed to me that early in the game, the Jets had 2 elements of their game plan. One was, we're going to look and see where Steven Nelson is pre-snap, and then we're going to throw it at him. And Nelson was giving up completion after completion. Then ultimately he left the game hurt. And to be honest, and I don't think McPherson's played well this year, but I didn't notice a difference between McPherson and Nelson on the field, which is something to keep in mind. If Nelson's not 100% coming out of the bye, or if the Eagles lose a game again, I'd rather just get him out. He's gone after this year. Just put McPherson in and let him get some reps. But the other thing they clearly targeted throughout the game was Alex Singleton.
Yeah,
they did everything they could to make Singleton cover guys in space, and Singleton just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
you could, and I never thought, if you told me in August I would say this on a podcast in December, I wouldn't have believed you. But you can really tell that the Eagles defense is missing Davion Taylor. The athleticism that he brought to the linebacker, and he's not the best in coverage. He's still learning to process things, but his click and close, his athleticism helps mask some of that. Where Singleton, I feel like, is a little more savvy. He just doesn't have the athleticism to get there. And so I think the biggest issue, it's been the biggest issue for a long time for the Eagles, is just the linebacker core. Watching it back on the All-22, you could see Gannon doing different things. We were rotating some safeties at the snap, trying to confuse Wilson, but the Jets were simplifying things for Wilson. Find Alex Singleton and throw the ball at him. And, that's not a hard thing for a quarterback to do. And the Eagles need to be able to take away, that easy stuff, especially against a quarterback like Wilson that struggled, make him get to that second read. And the Eagles linebackers just weren't able to get it done.
Yeah, and then on the defensive line, I thought, Josh Sweat and Javon Hargrave had really good games. I thought they really brought the pressure this week. Really need Josh Sweat to get going. I think he was my player of the game during the post-game show. He had 1.5 sacks. He's now got 5 sacks this year. He got $40 million, something along those lines, in that extension. The Eagles really need a bona fide edge rusher here, a legit pass rush moving forward, especially on the edges where this defense has been burned. Because you got Javon Hargrave, who's been terrific, especially Fletcher Cox. That they have been very good. But Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett, you look at what Derek Barnett did not have. George Fant probably went up against Derek Barnett for the most part, and George Fant did not allow a single pressure. So Derek Barnett, you never know what you're going to get week to week, other than those bonehead penalties during crucial moments. That is his forte for sure. But what do you think about the Eagles' defensive line? I thought Josh Sweat and Hargrave stood out to me.
Yeah, Hargrave really gets the credit for that first Josh Sweat sack. That was a quick 3-step drop. You can tell looking at how those offensive tackles passed that they were expecting a short drop, and Hargrave just drove the guard back into the pocket, and he flushed Zach Wilson out. So Josh Sweat should buy him a steak dinner after that one. Sweat gets the sack, but Hargrave caused that, and then they teamed up for a sack later on. Derek Barnett, totally absent in this game. He has 1 tackle, never noticed him on the field, which, to be honest, if you go through a game and you just don't notice Derek Barnett, that's probably a win at this stage of his career. Because typically if I notice Barnett, it's because he jumped off sides or got a dumb penalty. So I'm going to consider that a win. So player of the game, Derek Barnett, you never noticed him. At this point, it's clear Derek Barnett will be gone next year. They're not going to bring him back. Ryan Kerrigan's going to be gone. He's not coming back. And so you're going to be left next year with your edge rushers. You've got Josh Sweat, who I like, and hasn't quite put it all together. He's flashed, and you're going to have a 34-year-old Brandon Graham coming off of an Achilles injury, and who knows how that's going to go.
Yeah.
And so I think, and I'm sure we're going to get into the draft as we get closer to the offseason, but the Eagles are going to they're going to invest in the defensive line in the first round of this draft. They need to. Their philosophy is building in the trenches, and on the defensive side of the ball, especially on the edge, that's become a big question mark moving forward.
So where are they at now? Like 12, the pick number 12. Luckily the edge rushers in this class is deep. It's the exact opposite of last year. So you're going to get someone to fall there. I'm sure. So that's good. Maybe like Karlaftis will fall, which will hopefully be the case because Hayden Hutchinson is skyrocketing up the draft boards right now, especially with Michigan, the playoff football race going up. And then obviously have Kayvon Thibodeau, DeMarvin Leal. This just stacked of quality edge rushers. Maybe they double dip in the first few rounds. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they do that too. That's what it sounds like. But
right now the Eagles are at 12, 13, and 17. If the season ended today, that's where they would draft. Reuben Frank put out a mock draft yesterday, and he had him getting Trayvon Walker, the defensive lineman from Georgia, at 17.
Yeah, they gotta heavily go defense, heavy defense in this draft. There's no, if anybody's watching this, like it's beyond clear. Like really happy about the Eagles' offensive line, man. A lot of everyone across the board, Dickerson. However, that defensive line needs an injection of youth. Speaking of youth, how about Dallas Goddard, man? Dallas Goddard had a big game. Really happy to see him get, his first 2 touchdown game there. Dallas Goddard, 6 catches, 100+ yards. I loved seeing him active in that screen game. That was a really good thing to see. So Dallas Goddard, I think, had one of his best games this season. Any thoughts on Goddard, man?
Flashes of Doug Peterson with the tight end screen. That was always one of my favorite calls of Doug's, and it seemed like the only screen that we ever got to work under Peterson was that little tight end slip screen to Goddard. But yeah, Goddard was, he was uncoverable in the first quarter, and he slowed down after that. The Jets kind of bracketed him after that, and he played a great game with this extra attention that he was being given after that. I really wanted to see more production out of Devonta Smith. I think a lot of teams are playing, take away Smith first, and Goddard made the Jets adjust and take him away. But I'm not going to fault him for it too hard because in the second half, it became such a run-heavy attack. I think the Eagles only threw the ball 9 times in the second half. But again, you trade up for a guy, you trade up for a receiver and take him in the top 10. Mm-hmm. He's wide receiver 1, and I need him to be able to be productive. even if he's being double covered. And so I don't know if that's unfair expectations to put on a rookie, but we do need to see a step in production here from Devonta Smith, especially because, I mean, who else do the Eagles have? No one's taking pressure off of him. If you don't throw the ball to Goddard or Smith, you might as well just throw it away. Nobody else is making plays. And so we need to see one of them continue to step up each week for this offense.
No question. No question. That's an area that has been missing in this offense since, Jalen Hurts took the reins at quarterback. So hopefully we see more of this coming. Like they're already establishing the offensive line. The run blocking is terrific, but we just need to start selling that play action. We need to start attacking that intermediate area of the field, and hopefully that'll open up things for Dallas Goddard, for Devonta Smith down the field. Because I kind of seeing the same kind of weakness with Gardner Minshew and Jalen Hurts. They just don't have that arm strength. They don't have that ability to get the ball downfield accurately and on time. So, I mean, should we talk about Miles Sanders? I mean, I feel like we've dogged him for the last
Let's do it.
I mean,
so Miles Sanders goes 24 carries for 120 yards, 5-yard per carry average. He gets 3 receptions for 22 yards. He didn't find the end zone, and he ends up getting hurt after his 34-yard run, which unfortunately that just seems to be the thing with Miles Sanders is you break a big run and then you get hurt. I literally, the game against the Giants, I tweeted out that first run of the first or second half, and he got hurt after it, and we never saw him again. He averaged 3.7 yards per carry with the exception of that 34-yard run. So I dogged him a little bit on the post-game show. I said a lot of people were going to praise him because it was a 100-yard game. I didn't think he did that much that game. Watching it back, though, there were some things I was really impressed by with him. I saw several times him turn a 1-yard loss or a 1-yard gain into 4 or 5 yards. And so I might have been a little harsh on Sanders on the post-game show. I think he played a pretty solid game. I don't think it was spectacular, but I saw some things. I saw him doing some things in the backfield that he's traditionally struggled with, being patient, setting his blocks up, bursting through a hole. Saw some growth from him in those areas. Hopefully, that ankle injury, he can get over that over the bye week, and hopefully we can have that full stable of him and Howard healthy for that playoff push.
Yeah, you hear all the positive news about Jordan Howard coming back, which I love to hear because they need him. They need that guy leading this offense. So if the Eagles are going to have any impact, it's not comforting, Shane, that we're relying on Jordan Howard to get a playoff win because
Jordan Howard, a guy that no other team in the NFL wanted.
No, but you know how vital he is. Like he's such a huge piece of this offense. If this is what we're going to be doing offensively, they need a big back like that. So I don't know, man. Is that a bad thing? Like, is it because we don't? If he was like 24 years old and we, on his second year and under a easy contract, like I'd be really happy. But it's Jordan freaking Howard.
Yeah, I mean, and he's not the oldest running back. He's only 27.
He's only 27.
Yeah, and he's got tread left on the tires, mostly because he sat on practice squads because nobody wanted him. But
I take it back.
I mean, I don't think it's never ideal when such a key set piece for your offense is a running back like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different if a key piece of your offense is Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara, these guys that are so vital to your passing game. But, we say, the popular thing analytics nerds say is, and I'm an analytics nerd on this podcast, is that running backs don't matter. They only matter to the degree they impact the passing game. And so it's not ideal that the Eagles' entire offensive identity is built so much on the running game. I think and don't get me wrong, they're good at it. If there's a team that can succeed at it, it's the Eagles, and I'd throw the Ravens in that bucket and that category of teams that can succeed being a run-first team. But we've talked about it before off the air that the pathway to competing, if you don't have a top 10, 12 quarterback, if you don't have a dynamic passing offense, is just so small. There's no margin for error. If you have to be such a run-heavy team, what do you do in that playoff game where the other team drives down and scores and then you fumble the kickoff? Because let's be honest, Jalen Reagor is going to do that, right? and they score again. All of a sudden, you're down 14-0 on the road in a hostile playoff environment 8 minutes into a game. Well, you got to open it up a little bit. Can we do that? Yeah. I haven't seen so far. I mean, the Eagles have been on the win streak with the loss to the Giants, which is the sole game where they've passed a decent amount. I just haven't seen the passing offense under Jalen Hurts look like something that I can be confident in. And so that's the roundabout way, I guess, to answering your question. I don't think it's great that Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard are such key pieces for us going down the stretch here.
Yeah, it's all about establishing the run, and then hopefully we can start opening up that passing game from the run. Start, like I said, like making that play action, selling that play action, because it's not worked. Like every time teams know that they're going to play the pass and make Jalen Hurts beat you. That's like kind of, it is what it is. So we'll see what happens, man. But overall, it was a very good win from the Eagles. I wouldn't say very good. It was a good win from the Eagles. And they've got Washington coming up. So Jalen Hurts is going back for sure under center this weekend. You got to think that he's got to have a good game here. He's got to have a good game because social media, these Eagles fans, man, they will be all over him for any sort of quarterback controversy. They will be all over him for sure.
Yeah, in the last, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In Jalen Hurts' last 17 games, he's only completed 17 passes one time. And it was in a loss to the Raiders. And he only completed 53% of his passes in that game. So I do an Ask Me Anything at halftime of every Eagles game. Just people can ask me whatever random questions they want. And typically there's a lot of Eagles-related stuff. Sometimes there's just random things, and it's just a fun way for me to pass halftime. But somebody asked me about, the first half performance. Do you start Gardner Minshew after the bye?
No.
And the question was two parts. It was, will they and should they? And I said, will they? No. And should they? I'm going to say no. So to me, Gardner Minshew, he is a better passer than Jalen Hurts. I don't think you can dispute that. And in the short term, we proved the running game can work without Hurts. In the short term, I do think, you look at the Washington game after the bye, I think Gardner Minshew gives you a better shot to win that than Jalen Hurts. Yeah. But it's not about that short term. It's about the long term. This season is not about the short term. And to me, I know for sure what Gardner Minshew is. He's a top-tier backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. There is a chance because of the playmaking ability that Jalen Hurts has, if he can get that passing part down, which isn't easy to do. People say he's just got to learn to pass. Well, every quarterback that's ever tried to be in the NFL needed to learn how to pass, and most of them didn't do it. There's a lot of guys that wash out. Mm-hmm. But the long-term horizon, you got to give Jalen Hurts, you give him the rest of this year, you see where you're at. That development of him and figuring out what you have is so much more important than a singular game.
100%. And hopefully Devontae Smith, they can get him on the right track here to end the season on a high note. There are some good things happening. The Eagles offensive line, Brandon Brooks is coming back soon. And you look at this rushing attack, hopefully will open the door literally for this deep, downfield offense for the Eagles, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goddard, all those guys, because it hasn't been that great. I mean, on the ground, it's been very good, but through the air, we need to see Jalen Hurts take that next step, make those progressions, make quick decisions in the pocket. And that is the area that we need to see from Jalen Hurts as we move towards 2022.
So right now, the Washington football team is 6-6. The Eagles are 6-7. Eagles are on a bye while Washington plays Dallas. And then after that, they have identical schedules. They play each other twice, and they each play Dallas and the Giants one time. The Eagles get 3 of those games at home. Washington has 3 of those 4 games on the road. So I really believe second place in the NFC East will make the playoffs. And I really think, regardless of if the football team loses to Dallas or not, even if they win that game and they come in, a game ahead, you've got 2 of your final 4 games against Washington. It's going to come down to who can win those divisional games.
Yeah, and if this team continues to own time of possession, like they've had flashes of it, like that's really what it is. Like this offense needs to own time of possession. The offensive line needs to be that dominant for the Eagles to, keep that Eagles defense off the field. And if they can do that, there's a really good chance they can make a pretty good run here and get in the playoffs.
All right. My final question for you. What
Oh,
is your degree of confidence in both Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon moving forward? Do you want these guys back next year? How confident do you feel about each of them?
I've grown more and more confident with Sirianni. I'm pretty much done with Jonathan Gannon. You see kind of him get exposed against good quarterbacks between the sticks. Like he plays our guys way too far off the line. Against good quarterbacks, they will eat that defense alive. And we've seen that again and again. And you look at the quarterbacks the Eagles have faced lately, it's not good. So that's my fear, is that like the Eagles go on a win streak here against some bottom feeding teams. I'm sure Dak is probably not going to play that last game of the season. And then you get in the playoffs and they just get eaten alive. That's my fear, is that, so to answer your question, no, my confidence is absolutely zero in Jonathan Gannon. That being said, is the personnel ideal for his defense? Absolutely not. So that's the kind of shocking part, is that they're not moving as much as I had expected across the defensive line and attacking the quarterback. They kind of just continue to rush forward. It's like almost a celebration when we see a blitz at this point. So for me, Sirianni stays. Jonathan, you're gone.
All right. I'm with you on Sirianni. I really like the growth I've seen in him this year. I've been really encouraged by how his offense has shifted. I mean, we started the year with a screen-heavy thing, transitioned to pass-heavy, transitioned to run-heavy, and then back to screens with a new quarterback. And so I like the evolution that I've seen from Sirianni throughout the season. I'm not as out on Gannon as you are. I see some of the different things he's trying. I won't be disappointed if the Eagles let him go, but I won't be disappointed if they keep him, is kind of where I'm at with Gannon right now. I guess I'm a little more neutral on him.
Okay.
So,
cool.
All right. Well, Dibes, do you have any other notes that you wanted to get to on the Eagles game, or any final thoughts for us?
Final thoughts, man. The draft can't get here soon enough, man. We're counting down the days already. It's only the beginning of December. So I'm just excited for the NFL draft. That is going to be one hell of a party. And I'm just ready to go when it comes to this Eagles first round and deep diving into it. So just thanks for letting me join, man.
Yeah, we are draft degenerates on this show, and on the Painted Lines, the Eagles are in the middle of a playoff push, and we're already talking about draft. Can't wait. Did our live draft stuff last year. It's going to be a lot of fun again this year. So, Dibes, why don't you tell the people where they can find you?
Mr. Crockpot, if you want, you can follow me there. A lot of girl dad photos, a lot of food photos, and a lot of Marvel and DC content, Star Wars content. That's pretty much me in a nutshell.
All right. So if you guys enjoyed Dibes on the show, be sure you give him a follow, support his work. There's a lot of good stuff. So Dibes, thanks for joining in, filling Mark's co-hosting chair admirably, I might add.
Thanks, bro. Take it easy.
All right, you too. All right, so let's throw it around the NFL now. We're going to briefly highlight each game on the NFL slate from last week. Normally, I have Mark Henry Jr. here to throw things back and forth with, but today I do not. We're doing this solo, and so let's dive in. We're going to start with the Thursday night game. We had the Dallas Cowboys traveling to the Superdome to take on the Saints, and Dallas emerges from this game victorious 27-17. Dak Prescott goes 26 of 40 for 200 yards and one interception. He took one sack. Meanwhile, Taysom Hill proved he is not a quarterback. 19 of 41. He tossed 4 interceptions and took 2 sacks. Dallas had lost 2 of 3 games heading into this, and they managed to win without their head coach. And so that's a big thing. I mean, it wasn't confidence inspiring, but a win is a win, especially under those circumstances. And so they hope to get back on track as they face the Washington football team in a game that is suddenly important. They've only got a 2-game lead on Washington, and they play them twice. And so in theory, Washington does control their own destiny to win the NFC East. And so the Cowboys, this game is important for them. It's important for Washington. I'm really interested to see how it plays out, but we'll get to that on the preview show. Randy Gregory and Neville Gallimore are both headed back for Dallas. And so they're going to get a boost, to their defensive line, just guys returning from injury. You've got DeMarcus Lawrence, who spent a good portion of the year injured. He's trying to get back in a rhythm. Amari Cooper is coming back. And so they've got players on both sides of the ball that are either back now or coming back shortly that should provide them a boost. And then they've got young pieces making an impact in Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is lighting it on fire for their offense. Parsons is having a defensive rookie of the year campaign, even potential defensive player campaign. He's put up really good numbers, done more for this team than I thought he would have during the draft evaluation. So he's been a huge piece for them. We'll see how those pieces continue to mesh and grow together. Meanwhile, on the Saints side, this is a team that's just not going to go anywhere. As much as this podcast is a fan of Sean Payton as a coach, I don't understand his obsession with Taysom Hill. It's almost as if he sat on top of the NFL world. He won a Super Bowl, and maybe it's not the goal again. Maybe he wants to do something even more difficult, which is convince people Taysom Hill can be a quarterback. Like at this point, I feel like he's just gaslighting the NFL. He's trying to just see what he can get away with. I don't understand. Taysom Hill, he rushed for 101 yards. That's about all he brings. But there's only so much a team can do when they're down to their third quarterback. They're missing Alvin Kamara, a top 5 running back in the NFL. They're missing Michael Thomas, a top 5 receiver in the NFL. I'm not going to hate on them too much. It's just a team that, they're not going to make the playoffs, and they're looking at a quarterback for next year, I'm sure. Moving on to the Sunday slate, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to Atlanta to take the Falcons, and they win. Tom Brady goes 38 for 51 for 368 yards, and he tossed 4 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Matt Ryan goes 30 for 41 for 297, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Brady throws 51 passes in this game, so they're not trying to conserve his arm here. He ends up with 4 touchdowns for his effort. Chris Godwin had a franchise record in this game for catches with 15 catches for 143 yards. I really wish they would have handed the ball to Leonard Fournette more. That's mostly because he's on my fantasy team, but he did kick in 7 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea just destroyed this Falcons offensive line. They each had a pair of sacks. Matt Ryan would take 5 sacks on the day. And so the Bucs are in a push right now for home field advantage in the playoffs. They sit at 9-3. They are chasing the Cardinals. I don't know that they can catch the Cardinals, but they're still 1 game ahead of Dallas in the playoff picture for home field advantage. If we click over here, we can look at it at 9-3. They're tied with the Packers. They're at 1 game behind the Cardinals. It's all up in the air right now, and they're a game ahead of the Cowboys. And so we will see how that plays out down the stretch. The Falcons, they're running the ball well. Cordero Patterson had 13 carries for 78 yards and 6 yards per carry, which is impressive against the Bucs defensive front. In theory, it should help take the pressure off of Matt Ryan, but he is taking a lot of sacks. And this offensive line is it's in a bad place. And so Matt Ryan, maybe you want to think about hanging it up after this year just because you're tired of getting hit so much. Let's move on to Arizona at Chicago. The Cardinals win this game 33-22. Kyler Murray only throws 15 passes in this game, but he completes 11 of them for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. He adds 59 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns there as well. And so good game for Kyler Murray as he returns from injury. He had missed 3 games. So not the highest volume passing, but he did carry the ball 10 times. He threw it 15 times. I would say he was really efficient in this game. Meanwhile, the Bears, Andy Dalton goes 26 of 41 for 229 yards. He has 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Now, a couple of them were bad breaks. He had one hit a receiver in the hands. It should have been a catch. One was tipped at the line of scrimmage, but what are we doing here? I know Justin Fields is out right now with the rib injury, but it's just a disgrace that Matt Nagy would choose to roll with Dalton if both guys were healthy, if it was his choice. The Bears have to get rid of this guy. The Bears' schedule shapes up favorably. They can't let a couple late season wins convince them to run this back with Nagy next year. It's in the best interest of the franchise to develop Justin Fields, and Matt Nagy has shown he has no interest in doing so. So the Cardinals have a 1-game lead right now over the Packers and the Bucks. They have the 22nd strength of schedule left remaining. So they've got a pretty easy schedule. The Packers and the Bucks are at 30 and 29 respectively. So all three of the top seeds have easy schedules. The 1 seed is the Cardinals to lose at this point. They've now won 7 games on a row in the road. I mean, not like 7 straight road games, but they've had home games sprinkled in. But in their last 7 road games, they've won them all by double digits, which ties the NFL record. They can break that record in 2 weeks if they can manage to beat their next opponent on the road by double digits. And that next opponent is the Detroit Lions. Budda Baker had a big play in this game. He gets a pick six off of Andy Dalton. And he did not get a pick six. It should have been a pick six. I wrote this down in my notes wrong. If you haven't seen this, you should go look it up, because I promise you he has seen it. His teammates are making fun of him. He gets an interception that should have been a pick six, and he's got one guy to beat like 50 yards downfield. It's Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton takes him down. And so maybe if the quarterback thing doesn't work out for Dalton, maybe he could play linebacker in the NFL. Regardless, the Broncos should get him on the phone with Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe they can show Teddy how to make a tackle after an interception. Moving on, we've got the LA Chargers at the Cincinnati Bengals. LA wins this game 41-22. This was a crazy game. The Chargers scored 24 straight to open this game. Then the Bengals scored 22 unanswered to make it 24-22, and then the Chargers scored 17 straight down the stretch, which leads us to the final score of 41-22. Justin Herbert goes 26 of 35 for 317 yards and 3 touchdowns with 1 interception. I mean, in this game, Herbert was sacked 4 times. He threw an interception. Joey Bosa left with a head injury and didn't return, and the Chargers at one point turned it over on 3 straight drives, and they still won the game by 19. Herbert played awesome in this game. He had an average depth of target of 10.2 yards, which is something I have been begging for them to do, is to allow him to throw the ball downfield. He's got such a good arm, such an exciting young quarterback. So his ADOT was 10.2. He was 5 of 7 for 188 yards and a touchdown on passes that traveled over 20 yards in the air. This was his 15th 300-yard passing game, which is already a record for a quarterback in their first 2 seasons. And he still has 4 games left to go to pad his stats there. And so Justin Herbert having a great year. Joe Burrow also played well. He tosses 2 interceptions, but he throws for 300 yards. One of those interceptions wasn't really his fault. Meanwhile, injuries are piling up in Cincinnati. Chidobe Awuzie and Logan Wilson were both knocked out of this game. Joe Burrow injured his right pinky. He didn't leave the game, but it's something to monitor. That pinky on that throwing hand is a big deal. A lot of your grip strength comes from there, and so it's something that we can monitor as we move forward. Moving on, Minnesota traveled to Detroit, and the Lions pick up the first win of their season, 29-27. They win on a last-second touchdown, just like we predicted. On last week's show, episode 29 of Chalk Talk, I put this clip out on Twitter. Both Mark Henry Jr. and worried about them taking a wild card spot. I really think it's going to be the 49ers in second place in the NFC East. In this game, the Lions blew a 20-6 lead, which is concerning if you're the Vikings. How are you going to be down 20-6 at halftime to a team that's winless? And then they needed a 75-yard touchdown drive with 1:50 left, and the Vikings gave it up. The Lions drive right down the field. Jared Goff throws the game-winning touchdown pass, and the Lions will not end this season without a win. Moving on, we've got the New York Giants at the Miami Dolphins. Miami wins this game 20-9. I guess this was a Super Bowl hangover for the Giants. It's hard to go back and play a game right after your Super Bowl from last week, where they beat the evil Eagles, who kept them out of the playoffs last year with 6 wins. And so hard to get up for a game that's not as important, I guess. I don't know. Tua goes 30 of 41 for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. The Dolphins have really started to rely on an RPO-heavy attack. They're getting the ball out of Tua's hands quickly. His ADOT is low, his air yards is low, but it's working. And so I don't know if you can argue with the results there. this is always a team that we said was going to have to win with a dominant defense. And it seems they found the offensive formula to sort of work with that. Tua was only 5 of 12 throwing beyond 10 yards, but he was 21 of 24 within 10 yards. And so they're playing to Tua's strengths. They're letting their defense do work. Unfortunately for Eagles fans, they might remember when Miami was 1-7 and they have the Dolphins' first-round pick. Well, now the Dolphins have won 5 straight to get to 6-7, and they might not lose again in the regular season. They have the Jets, the Saints, the Titans, and the Patriots left, and presumably the Patriots could be resting starters in that last week. And so it's possible the Dolphins run the table, that they get to 10-7, and this is a team, they're going to make the playoffs. And that pick that was once a top 5 pick that I said was never going to be a top 5 pick. People gave me crap on Twitter about being a downer. Well, here you go. They've won 5 straight. They may not lose again this regular season. Moving on, we have the Colts and the Texans. The Colts win this game 31-0, shut out the Texans, and they hit their bye week above 500. Started the year rough. They're 7-6 now. They have 2 weeks to get ready for New England and Arizona back-to-back, and that is a crucial stretch for this team. They likely need to win 3 of their 4 remaining games to get to the playoffs. And so we can look at the playoff picture. They are 7-6 right now. They're still 2 games behind the Titans with 5 games left. And so they're not likely to catch the Titans, although it's possible. But the Titans have the Jaguars left. So they're likely playing for this playoff spot where they're a half a game, or this wild card spot where they're a half a game behind the Bills and the Bengals. They need to go on a run here, but they have, 3 of their next 4 opponents have a winning record. And India's only beat 1 team with a winning record this season, and it was the Buffalo Bills. And so the Colts need to continue to roll. They need to continue to feed Jonathan Taylor. Look at the stat lines here. You give Jonathan Taylor 32 carries, and Carson Wentz plays an efficient game. That's what they need from him. 16 of 22 for 158 yards and 1 touchdown, notably no interceptions. On the Texan side, they're in chaos. Tyrod Taylor gets hurt again and leaves the game. He's 5 of 13 with a pick. Davis Mills is 6 of 14. The Texans desperately need a quarterback, and I would look for them to address that this offseason. A crazy stat from this game is Camus Grugier-Hill for the Texans. Eagles fans might recognize the name. He had 20 tackles in this game, so just a huge number of tackles, which doesn't really mean anything, but it's an interesting statistic. Moving on, we have the Washington football team traveling to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. They emerge victorious 17-15. Taylor Heineke goes 23 of 30 for 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He adds 10 yards rushing. He took 1 sack. As my co-host Mark Henry would say, the Heineke hive is alive and well. The Heineke reigns. And Taylor Heineke has the Washington football team on track. They're surging. They've won 4 straight. They're making a serious playoff push. Meanwhile, this is a brutal loss for the Raiders, a team that got back on track last week, and then they just, gave it all back this week. Derek Carr goes 28 of 38 for 249 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. There's just not a lot going on for them. Deshaun Jackson only had 1 catch. Hunter Renfrow has a really good game, but it's not enough as they only put up 15 points on a suddenly stingy Washington football team defense. Washington plays Dallas twice in the next 3 weeks. They go Dallas, Philadelphia, which is just stupid scheduling. NFL, knock it off. I know you want division games at the end of the year so people don't rest starters or it's less likely, but this is just absurd scheduling. You should not go 4 straight games against only 2 opponents. Spread these games out. I would love to see every division's first 3 weeks be games against your division and the last 3 weeks games against your division. But stacking these up at the end is fine, but I hate seeing a team play the same team twice in a 3-week period. But Washington gets Dallas, Philadelphia. For the Raiders, Derek Carr had 10.1 yards per attempt in the second half, but he only had 4.5 in the first half. The reality is I think it took him too long to settle in against his former coach, Jack Del Rio, who was his head coach in Las Vegas. I guess it was Oakland at the time. and is now the defensive coordinator for the football team. He knows Carr's tendencies well, and he was able to really slow him down in the first half before he sort of got going in the second half. It was just too little, too late. Moving on, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to Los Angeles to get smacked by the Rams, 37-7. Matthew Stafford gets back on track. He throws for 295 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sony Michel has 121 yards rushing and a touchdown. Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence goes 16 of 28 for 145 yards, and he does not get the ball into the end zone. The strangest thing for me from this game on the Jaguars side is that they almost didn't play James Robinson in the lead up to this game. He was coming off of an injury. They were concerned. They didn't know if he would play. And then down by 30 points in the fourth quarter, they had him out there taking handoffs. And it just doesn't make sense. Urban Meyer was asked about it, and he said that, I don't know, the run game coordinator must have wanted to get him some carries. And the reporter pressed him, and he said, well, that doesn't really make sense. And Urban Meyer said, I'd agree with that. So he's selling his run game coordinator on the river. Just absurd lack of accountability from Urban Meyer, a guy who is now, I think, in self-preservation mode. He's going to start throwing these guys under the bus. Anyways, on the Rams side, I don't think this game tells us anything about the Rams either. This is a game they should have won in blowout fashion. They did win it in blowout fashion. They will get a chance to make a statement on Monday Night Football when they take on the Cardinals in a huge game for playoff positioning. Moving on, we have the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh wins this game 20-19. Baltimore scores a touchdown at the end of this game, and they decided to go for 2 in the win instead of taking it to overtime. And they don't get the conversion. And it was kind of a strange play. They left TJ Watt unblocked on the right side, which is where Lamar was looking to pass. I really don't understand that. If you want to leave a guy unblocked, you should be rolling away from him. But they leave TJ Watt, who had a huge game, unblocked, and it disrupts the throw. The ball does hit Mark Andrews in the hands. He's unable to bring it in. Asked after the game about it, Harbaugh said that they had injuries at cornerback. They've had injuries at cornerback all year. Marlon Humphrey got hurt. He was out of the game. And he said, just simply, we were out of quarterbacks. And Pittsburgh had scored 17 in the fourth quarter. We knew we couldn't stop them in overtime. We had to try to get the win there. So the rationale makes sense. The decision to leave TJ Watt unblocked does not. TJ Watt had a monster game. He gets 3.5 sacks. He had 12 pressures, a 37% pass rush win rate. On this season, in all but 2 games that he has played in, he has a sack. He has a QB hit in all but 1, and he has a tackle for loss in all but 2. He is currently on pace for 24 sacks, which would break Michael Strahan's record of 22.5 for a single season, although he does get 1 additional game. And like I mentioned earlier, for the Ravens, Marlon Humphrey is out for the year, which is just a huge blow for a team that is in a playoff push and has been so beat up by injuries this season. Moving on to a surprising result from this slate. San Francisco travels to Seattle, and they drop this game to the Seahawks 23-30. Seattle's offense finally got rolling in this game. Russell Wilson is 30 of 37 passing for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. The run game was okay. They averaged 5.4 yards per carry, 146 total yards, although a 73-yard run really did boost that. And Adrian Peterson, the ghost of Adrian Peterson, scores a touchdown in this game. They gave up. Now, this game came down to the end as well. Seattle has the lead. They give up a 95-yard drive before they hold at the 3-yard line to end this game. And so it got closer than it ever should have been. San Francisco just shot themselves in the foot too much in this game. They committed 10 penalties. They had 3 turnovers, 2 of them Jimmy Garoppolo interceptions, and they gave up a special teams touchdown. They missed an extra point. Just a lot of bad things all hit at once for the 49ers. And now suddenly, it's up in the air for them to make the playoffs. This is a team I would have considered for sure in. I still think that they will be in just by virtue of the fact that I have no confidence in the Vikings. And Washington and Philadelphia play each other twice. And so, they're going to beat each other up. The worst case for the 49ers here would be that Washington and Philadelphia split those games and then win out the rest of their games. That's about the only scenario. I don't see the 49ers making the playoffs. But that loss does hurt nonetheless. Moving on to the Sunday night football game, we had the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs come out on top in this one, 22-9. This is only the second time in their 5-game winning streak that the Chiefs have topped 20 points. And it took them a pick six to do it. Teddy Bridgewater throws a pick six, once again gives no effort at all to make a tackle. Patrick Mahomes is 15 of 29 for 184 yards and a pick. He's just not playing well right now. This Chiefs offense is not clicking. They're figuring it out on defense. They just aren't figuring anything out on offense. And I think it could go either way. You could see the Chiefs as a team that's an early exit in the playoffs, but there's also a chance, the further this goes, eventually you've got to feel like the Chiefs are going to figure it out. This is definitely not a team that you're going to want to face in the playoffs just because of the potential that they have. But right now, this offense continues to struggle. And they really need to get back on track heading into the very end of this schedule here. And then finally, our Monday night football game. And what a game it was. We had the New England Patriots traveling to Buffalo in terrible conditions. 25-mile-an-hour sustained winds, gust up to 40 or 45, I think. And the Patriots get this win 14-10. Mac Jones with the QB performance of the year. He goes 2 of 3 passing for 19 yards. I saw a clip on Twitter. I'm not sure if you guys saw it floating around, but saw a clip on Twitter of a kicker warming up, and he was attempting an extra point, and he kicks it, and there was a gust of wind. The ball's going straight, and then all of a sudden the gust of wind, and it just blows like straight up, and then the ball just fell down. Like he literally missed an extra point short because of those gusts of wind. So there's not a lot that you can take away from this game in terms of, how the offenses looked. There's not in a weather game like that, there's just not that much you can say. But what I will say is that the Bills lost a game to an opponent that threw 3 passes. The Bills lose games in the trenches. They can't run. You saw that in this game. They have 25 carries for 99 yards. On a game where it would have been advantageous to try to run the ball, they just simply couldn't do it. And against an opponent they knew was only running the ball, they gave up 222 yards on the ground, 4.8 yards per attempt. The Bills have got to fix this. They cannot rely on Josh Allen to carry this team the way that he did last year. 2020 Josh Allen is an aberration. He's not going to get back to that level. 2017 Carson Wentz was a special season. He didn't hit it again. Josh Allen had a special season in 2020. Randy Moss had a special season with his crazy touchdowns when Tom Brady threw 50 touchdowns that year. Those are not your norm. That's an extraordinary year. Josh Allen is not 2020 Josh Allen. He's a very good quarterback, but the Bills have to help him out. And right now they are giving him no help in the trenches. And it's going to cost this team. It could cost this team a playoff spot as we roll back over to our playoff picture here. The Bills are now suddenly on the fringe of missing the playoffs. They're only a half a game ahead of the Steelers, which is a team that I don't think is going to make the playoffs. I don't trust the Steelers right now enough, but they're only half a game ahead of the Colts at 7-6, and they're only 1 game ahead of the Raiders. Of course, the Browns and Broncos, who I'm not really concerned about. But this is a team that they're gonna have to get on pace. They're gonna have to give Josh Allen some help and figure it out. And they've got 5 weeks left to do so. So that's gonna wrap it up for our review show. Mark Henry Jr. will be back on air with me later this week for our preview show. So I hope you guys will tune into that. Before I get out of here, I just want to give a final thought for a team that did not have a game but made headlines over their bye week, as Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, is fired. It's coming out now that he was fired because he had fundamental disagreements with Matt Rule about play calling. I thought when you were a head coach and you hired an offensive coordinator, you did it so he could call the plays. But Matt Rule wanted Joe Brady to commit to running the ball 35 times a game, something that Joe Brady didn't do and should not do, even if Christian McCaffrey was healthy, which he has not been. But Matt Rule wants Chuba Hubbard to get 35 carries a game. Joe Brady wasn't doing it, so Matt Rule fired him. Now, this is a guy who had head coaching interviews last year. He is a hot name, and I fully expect him to at least be an offensive coordinator again next year, if not a head coach. In fact, the Carolina Panthers should fire Matt Rule and put Joe Brady in as the head coach. Rule is scrambling. He's throwing anybody under the bus to save his job, including the guy that should already have it. Well, that's going to do it here Thank you for joining us for episode 30 of Chalk Talk. I hope you enjoyed the guest appearance from Dibes. Like I said, we'll be back to normal later this week with our preview show. So if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and I hope that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star comment or review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. So for me, from Mark, from Dibes, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.